All right, so imagine this. You're starting your day. You're in the kitchen. You're deciding what to eat for breakfast. Scrambled eggs, pancakes. Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Sure.
But here's the thing. Did you actually choose the scrambled eggs? Or was that decision, like, already made for you by your brain, by the universe, maybe even before you were born?
Whoa.
It's a bit freaky,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today, the whole illusion of free will. And let me tell you, after reading these articles you sent, I'm seriously questioning everything I thought I knew.
Well, and that's what makes this topic so fascinating, right? I mean, it's not just some abstract philosophy seminar.
Right.
It gets at the core of how we see ourselves as humans, how we
Yeah.
interact with the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, if we don't actually have free will, if our choices are already made for us, then what does that mean for responsibility, for morality, for even the simplest things like making plans for the future?
It's like my to-do list suddenly feels a lot less like a set of choices and a lot more like destiny written out for me.
Right.
But okay, before we spiral too far down that existential rabbit hole,
Yeah.
let's start with some definitions. When we talk about free will, what are we even talking about?
So at its simplest, free will is the idea that we have the power to make choices that are truly our own, not just the outcome of like a chain of events set in motion way back when.
Yeah.
It's the ability to make a choice based on our own desires, on our values, our own internal compass, and not because some external force is, pulling us in a certain direction.
So it's like that feeling of being in the driver's seat of our lives, consciously making decisions about which path to take.
Exactly. But then, you got the determinists. And they're coming in with like a metaphorical bulldozer
Mm.
ready to pave over that idea completely.
Right. And the Singh article, that's where they really lay out their argument, right?
Yeah.
And it's pretty convincing. It's like they're saying the universe is this massive, intricate clock,
Yeah.
and we're just cogs in the machine, moving in ways that were determined, like, from the first tick of the Big Bang.
Exactly. The determinists, they'd say that every single action, every decision we make is really just the result of every condition that came before it. This chain reaction is stretching all the way back to the beginning of, well, everything.
Okay, that's both awe-inspiring and kind of terrifying at the same time.
Right.
But there was this one part in the McGuire article that tripped me up a bit, a quote from Schopenhauer.
Oh, yeah.
He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "I can do what I will to do, but I cannot determine my will." What does that even mean in this context?
Schopenhauer, he was wrestling with this exact puzzle centuries ago.
Right.
And his point, it cuts to the heart of the determinist view. He's basically saying that even when we feel like we're making choices, the desires, the motivations that drive those choices, our will, as he puts it, that's ultimately outside of our conscious control.
So even if I can choose to eat the cookie or not eat the cookie, the very fact that I want the cookie in the first place, that's already been decided for me.
Exactly. And for the determinists, that underlying desire, that's just a product of a really, really long chain of prior causes. Your genetics, your upbringing, every experience you've ever had, they all play a part in shaping your will, often in ways you're not even aware of.
Okay, my head is officially spinning now, but
Yeah.
if everything's already determined, then what's the point of even trying to make choices? Do we have any say in who we become or what we do?
Now that is the million-dollar question. And it's one that philosophers have been debating for centuries, probably millennia.
Right.
But before we disappear down that particular rabbit hole, there's a fascinating curveball we've got to consider. Something thrown into the mix from the world of physics, specifically the wacky world of quantum mechanics.
Oh, yeah, the Singh article touched on that, right? It's
Right.
Suddenly, we're not just dealing with clocks and cogs anymore. We've got subatomic particles, probabilities. It's a whole new ballgame.
Absolutely.
So does this quantum stuff, does it completely derail the determinist argument?
Well, it definitely throws a wrench in the gears. You see, quantum mechanics introduces this element of randomness at the subatomic level. Basically, things aren't as predictable as they seem when you're just looking at the universe through, like, a Newtonian physics lens.
So instead of a perfectly predictable chain reaction, it's more like a cosmic game of chance.
In a way, yeah. Imagine this, right? An electron in your brain, it fires randomly, and that tiny random event influences you to, let's say, watch a funny video online instead of cleaning the kitchen. Was that choice truly yours? Or were you just at the mercy of a subatomic coin toss?
Okay, so maybe not as comforting as I first thought, but even if there is this element of randomness, does that automatically equal free will?
That's the debate, right? And it brings us to another fascinating concept, emergence.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Emergence. What is that and how does it fit into all of this?
So emergence, it's this really wild idea that the whole can be like greater than the sum of its parts.
Oh,
Think about it like this. You got a big city, right? Millions of people all doing their own thing, making choices big and small. Each one basically impossible to predict with complete accuracy, right?
I'm picturing like a massive ant colony, but with less picnic basket rating?
Right.
Go ahead.
Exactly. So now zoom out, right? Forget about the individual ants or people. Look at the city as a whole. What do you see?
Well, patterns, I guess. Traffic flows, neighborhoods form, trends come and go.
Exactly. Those large-scale patterns, they're not dictated by some like central planner, right?
Right.
They emerge organically from all those tiny interactions, all those individual choices.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. But how does this apply to our brains and free will? We're not just talking about traffic jams in our heads, are we?
Not exactly, but you're on the right track. See, the human brain, it is the ultimate complex system, right? Billions of neurons, each one firing, interacting, tiny bits of electrical activity. That's all they are. But from all that, from that intricate dance of neurons, something remarkable emerges. Consciousness, self-awareness, and maybe, just maybe, the ability to make choices that aren't, just pre-programmed responses.
So you're saying even if individual neurons are bound by the laws of physics, the way they interact on a higher level, that's where things get interesting. Like that's where free will, or at least our experience of making choices, might come from.
Precisely. And that's where the deterministic model, it starts to break down a bit. Because if free will, or at least our conscious experience of it, if it's an emergent property of this incredibly complex system, well, maybe it's not bound by the same rules that govern, say, a single atom, or even a single neuron.
Okay, that is a mind-blowing concept, but it's still pretty theoretical, right? I mean, is there any actual scientific evidence that our brains are doing something more than just carrying out pre-programmed instructions?
Well, this is where neuroscience comes in. It gives us this like fascinating glimpse inside that black box of the human brain. And there's this really groundbreaking research by a scientist named Benjamin Libet that really throws a wrench into how we traditionally think about free will.
Oh yeah, the Singh article mentioned Libet's work. It's the one where, like, our brains make decisions before we even realize it, right?
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
kind of freaky when you think about it. So Libet, he did these experiments where he asked people to make simple choices, like pressing a button with their left or right hand, nothing major.
Right.
But the whole time, he was monitoring their brain activity. And what he found was, well, there was a measurable buildup of neural activity related to the decision before the participant was consciously aware of making the choice.
Wait, so you're saying, like, my brain is already deciding if I want coffee or tea before I've even really thought about it?
In a way, yeah, it's like your unconscious mind is starting the engine, and your conscious mind, it's getting in the car a little late.
That is unsettling. So does that mean our conscious mind is totally powerless? Are we just along for the ride?
Not quite. See, Libet, he found something else too, something crucial. Yes, the unconscious brain, it might initiate the action, but there's still this window of time, a very small window, where the conscious mind can step in and basically veto the decision.
So it's like a last-minute swerve to avoid an accident.
Exactly. This veto power, it suggests that consciousness, while maybe not the initiator, it still plays a crucial role in shaping our behavior. It's like we have this internal braking system that lets us override those initial impulses.
Okay, well, that makes me feel slightly less like a puppet of my own subconscious. But how does this connect to what Schopenhauer was saying about not being able to determine our will? If these unconscious impulses are already shaping my desires, where does my conscious choice even come in?
That is the million-dollar question. And it brings us back to McGuire and his ideas about the surface self versus the deeper self.
Okay, remind me about that distinction again. It's been a lot to keep track of.
Right. It's complicated stuff. So McGuire's idea is basically this, right? What we perceive as our conscious self, the I that's making choices, experiencing the world, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
Underneath, there's this whole ocean of unconscious processes, memories, instincts, desires, and those are constantly influencing our thoughts, our feelings, even our actions, whether we realize it or not.
So you're saying our sense of self, that feeling of I that seems so in control, it's more like a storyteller trying to make sense of the decisions our brains are already making.
Precisely. Think about a time when you made a choice that seemed totally out of character, or you acted on a desire you didn't even know you had. McGuire would argue those moments, those seemingly inexplicable moments, they reveal the influence of that deeper self. that hidden ocean of unconscious forces that shape so much of our experience.
Wow, it really makes you question everything you think you know about yourself. If our unconscious minds are really calling the shots, does that mean true free will is just an illusion? That we're all just puppets, controlled by these hidden desires and motivations? It's kind of unsettling to think that this deeper self might be making decisions without us consciously knowing about it. Does that mean true free will is just an illusion? That we're all just puppets controlled by these hidden desires and motivations?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? But here's where things get even more interesting. Even if our brains are making decisions before we're consciously aware, does that automatically mean free will goes out the window? Or could it just mean that we need to rethink how we understand it?
I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, let me put it this way. What if, instead of thinking of free will as this absolute power to create our desires out of thin air, we see it as the ability to choose among the desires we already have, even if those desires themselves are shaped by things we're not consciously aware of?
So, less about where the desires come from, more about what we do with them.
Exactly. It's like maybe we're not the authors of every impulse, but we can be the editors of our own lives. We have the power to look at our thoughts, our feelings, think about what's motivating us, and then choose. Which desires do we act on? Which ones do we let go of?
That's actually a pretty empowering way to think about it. It's not that we're off the hook for our choices, but we're also not completely powerless against these unconscious impulses.
Right. And that's where McGuire's ideas about self-awareness and personal growth come into play. Because the more we understand about this deeper self, our hidden biases, our unconscious patterns, all the experiences that have shaped our desires, the better equipped we are to make conscious choices that actually line up with what we value, what we truly aspire to.
So it's like the more we know ourselves, the more freedom we have, even if we don't have total control over every single thought or impulse that pops into our heads.
Exactly. But hold on, because there's one more mind-bending element to consider here. Remember McGuire touching on the idea of time as an illusion? Well, that adds a whole other layer of complexity to this whole debate about free will.
Oh, yeah, he quoted Einstein on that one. Time is an illusion. How does that fit into everything we've been talking about?
Well, think about it. If we entertain the idea that time isn't what we perceive it to be, that the past, present, and future are all connected in ways we can't even grasp, then this whole idea of a linear chain of events leading to a predetermined outcome, well, it becomes a lot less straightforward.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that one. So you're saying if time isn't linear, then maybe cause and effect, the whole this leads to that thing, maybe that gets blurry too.
Exactly. If our traditional understanding of cause and effect starts to fall apart, then the deterministic model, that idea of a neat and tidy chain of events leading to our inevitable choices, well, it might start to unravel too.
Okay, I see how that would throw a wrench in things.
Hmm.
But even if we accept all of that quantum randomness, emergent consciousness, time is an illusion, I mean, what does it all actually mean for how we live our lives? We still have to make choices every day, right?
We do. And I think that's the most important thing to take away from all of this. Whether or not we can definitively prove or disprove the existence of free will, the experience of making choices, that feeling, it's real. We feel it every single day.
So even if it's an illusion, it's a powerful one.
Incredibly powerful. Because our beliefs about free will, whether we think we have it, don't have it, or something in between, they shape everything.
Oh.
Our attitudes, our actions, the kind of lives we build for ourselves.
That makes sense. It's like even if my choices are already determined, it still feels like I'm making them, and that experience matters.
Right. And that sense of agency, that feeling of being the author of our own stories, well, it's something to be cherished, even if we acknowledge that it might be more complex, more nuanced than we realize.
So where does that leave us? What's the final takeaway from this deep dive into the illusion of free will?
You know, I think it boils down to this. The scientific debate about free will, the philosophical arguments, those might go on forever. But the real question, the one that matters most, is how we choose to live with that uncertainty.
Okay, I like that.
Because we could get stuck, right? Stuck trying to find one definitive answer, trying to prove or disprove something that might be ultimately unknowable. Or we can embrace the mystery, admit that it's complex, and focus our energy on what we can control, our awareness, our intentions, and the choices we make in each and every moment.
That's a really interesting way to frame it. It's less about finding the right answer and more about, well, finding a way to live with the question itself.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe by embracing that uncertainty, by staying curious about these big questions, maybe we actually open ourselves up to a greater sense of agency, a wider range of possibilities than we ever imagined.
I love that thought. So to wrap things up, even if we can't definitively say whether or not our choices are truly free, well, maybe that's not the point. Maybe the real magic is in that mystery and that constant dance between our conscious intentions and the vast, intricate workings of the universe.
Beautifully said. And maybe, just maybe, that sense of wonder and possibility is the most liberating perspective of all.